Okay, hi everyone to this INDEP online event with Simon Hanna about his introductory book on ecosocialism and democratic economic planning. I'm gonna hold it into the camera. Yes, which is called Reclaiming the Future, a beginner's guide to planning the economy, published by Pluto Press. And a few words on Simon. So I asked Simon, hey, can you send me a bio? And he said, I'm supposed to tell you that he is the best Marxist mind of his generation, and his grasp of dialectical thinking is unmatched, which is why he has written such a good book. He is currently an exploited proletarian in his day job. He works in local government and is a trade union activist, and he's a member of anti-capitalist resistance, which I'm going to post a link into the chat right here. Here we go. And that's it. Simon, take it away.
Thank you, Eric, for that glowing introduction, which I wrote out for you and asked you to say. So thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for everyone who's come to the talk tonight, and thank you to INDEP also for organising. I've been very impressed with the work that you've all been doing internationally to try and foreground some of these discussions, which I think some people find very complicated, maybe, or a bit obscure. And so the work that you're doing to try and create spaces where people can think about democracy and post-capitalist economics, I think is really important. And my book really is a contribution to that discussion. It is intended, as Eric said, it's a beginner's guide to planning the economy. So it is a book that looks at post-capitalist economic relations and moving towards a post-scarcity society in which we can live the good life as human beings within planetary limits. And obviously, the book doesn't have a complete model for that. If there was a complete model that any one person could think of under capitalism, then that person can probably sell that model and become very rich. But it is more about the political arguments and the general political philosophy that would need to be adopted in terms of the social movements, the trade unions, the socialist left, the organizations which we're all part of, and the kind of approach that we would need to take if we wanted to build that democratic eco-socialist society, learning the lessons of the past. So we're not just repeating some of the old post-capitalist models we had in the 20th century, but looking to a new, better way of moving beyond capitalism. And that's really the core argument of the book. So if people find it useful, or if it inspires people who are smarter than me and also more focused than me to go on and be able to develop more clear models and arguments and strategies around it, then the book has achieved its purpose. The basic argument of the book is that it should really go without saying that the depth and extent of the ecological crisis before us forces us to engage in the practical work, not just of movement building and developing revolutionary programs and organizations and so on, but of making a convincing case for how society can be organized differently in such a way that we are not destroying the potential basis of life on the one planet we have available for us to live on. The argument of the book is rooted in the idea that we are in a late stage capitalism. I know Marxists have often used such phrases in the past, but for me, I want to use it in the sense that if we take the old Frederick Jameson formula that, capitalist realism, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. We are now in a space where the depth of the capitalist accumulation approach and the ecological devastation that it is wreaking on the planet means that the end of the world and the end of capitalism, well, like they've kind of collapsed into each other into a similar space. Late stage capitalism is simply that we've had capitalism for 200 years or so. You can't imagine it surviving for another 200 years, not in the way that it is at the moment, not as a mass kind of consumer based society where there's a certain level of civilizational advancement, the continued existence of the capitalist system that we have now, rooted in global imperialism as well, is such that it will and is already eating away at the basis of the sustainability of civil and social life as the climate crisis deepens. So it's very much an eco-socialist book in that argument, and I think the climate crisis is also the most powerful argument that socialists have for the necessity of overcoming capitalism and the importance of having that as an urgent part of what we're doing and what we're organizing around. So the book also has a concept of the metabolic rift, which is popular in some socialist circles. The idea that humans, we are part of nature. We are not separate from nature. We are part of nature, but we are a thinking, conscious part of nature, and we are a species that constantly acts on nature and transforms and develops and works on the materials of the world around us. That is one of the things that characterizes us as a species, and that we can do that in a sustainable way with the environment, with the living world around us. But because of the nature of capitalism, it creates the metabolic rift within nature itself, between us and nature. And this is one of the ideas in the book: is can we begin to stop the metabolic rift? It's effectively a gulf now. It's a metabolic gulf. Can we stop it getting worse? And can we begin to heal it? And what are the methods by which we can heal it in a way which also provides a good life for people? So one of the arguments in the book about the metabolic rift is, and how we can think about it, is that the specific rupture that capital brings about causes it to destabilize the kind of cycles and patterns that exist in the world. There's, the climate cycle, there's cloud accumulation, there's the nitrous and carbon cycles, and so on. And capitalism ruptures these through causing overaccumulation or underaccumulation. So, for instance, it
Super
starts in,
quickly,
right.
Simon. Sorry, I just want to say, like, if you want to show slides, because I see that you're reading something, like, they're not showing. I just want to, if you don't
Okay,
want
no,
to
sorry, yeah,
show,
yeah. I
that's
mean,
totally fine.
yeah, no. Like this is mainly text at the moment. Like I might have a slide at the end, but yeah, sort of. Like this because this is a quote from the book. So it started in agriculture with intensification of farming through the use of fertilizers and pesticides, alongside deforestation, which led to soil erosion, and eutrophication, which is the accumulation of algae. So what we have with agriculture, which is one of the first industries that humanity ever developed as a species, is the way that capitalism, in particular, intensifies the amount of agricultural development, because it is seeking profit at all times, causes overaccumulation of things like nitrogen within the soil, and also underaccumulation, so like deforestation, for instance. And if we begin to think about the rupture as that, then I think we can begin to see how we can think about the destabilization of the world, of how capitalism does these things. There's also, of course, overaccumulation of carbon in the atmosphere. That is the number one cause of greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore global warming. And the consequences of that overaccumulation is the underaccumulation of the glacial cycle. So I'm sure people have been reading the news. The ice caps are all melting. Massive Arctic sheets are breaking away and dissolving, and there's just not the same reaccumulation of Arctic ice as there has been historically. So these are the kind of processes that we need to look at. It should go without saying also that we are losing the argument globally. We're in a kind of global counter-revolutionary phase where the post-war gains that were won after World War II in many countries are being attacked and ripped up. I think this has happened in two phases. We had the Thatcher and Reagan phase, where they ripped up the idea of a welfare economy, the mixed economy, social democracy as a socio-economic model, came under sustained attack by the capitalist class in order to try and restore profit and so on. and that was obviously largely successful in a lot of places. And now we're in the second wave, which is, the Bolsonaros, the Trumps, the Malonis, the Malays in Argentina, and so on, where they are obviously continuing that agenda, but now it's more about the idea of social equality and social liberation. So the limited gains that were made by the women's movement or the civil rights movement or the LGBT cause are all under attack. And of course, within that is a deep-seated climate denialism. So there is a sustained attack now from the far right in their increasingly in positions of power, in positions of governmental power, to ignore climate change. It's not happening. It's a woke science agenda. Therefore, it's not real, or it's just being pushed by the left and so on. Or yeah, so like outright climate kind of denialism. So in Britain, where I am, Nigel Farage just did a tweet just in the last kind of day or so, where he said, action on the climate means you don't have a car, you're not allowed to leave the country by plane, everything becomes more expensive, and the left just controls you and says you can't do this, you can't do that, and it's this kind of sustained attack that is going on, like even about the idea of climate change. And unfortunately, it is gaining a hearing. I think one of the reasons why it gains a hearing is because people are scared and they feel powerless. And the idea of capitalism driving global warming and other forms of environmental devastation, like destruction of natural species, is something that people just don't want to deal with. So it's better to just ignore it and to listen to authoritarian right wing figures who promise you an easy life and like just don't worry about these things. I think the left has to think about ways that we can challenge that. So these are sort of the key things that are driving the crisis, which is at the heart of what the book is trying to challenge and overcome. So I want to talk about some of the alternatives and some of the ways that we can think about the alternatives. I'm sure some people are familiar with some of these already, but I'm interested also in trying to elaborate some of these historical concepts to new generations of people so that they can think about what it might mean for them and the world that they're going to fight to create. So I want to start from the concept of how we can use eco-socialist democratic planning to ensure the good life for people. So this is not about sort of the kind of states that maybe the Soviet Union was creating in the 1930s, but is about a way that we can build a new type of economics which provides a good society for everyone as a universal concept of what it is to be human. So ensuring this good quality of life is at the core of what I think we're trying to do as eco-socialists. We are trying to ensure that every human being born on this planet can live a good life. That might mean different things, obviously for different people, but it means a life where you are not kind of driven by scarcity, you are not driven by the kind of social divisions and class hierarchies and conflicts which dominate our lives. And of course, we're not, forced to work years and years of our lives for bosses to make profit for them, and then we struggle with retirement when we get older because we are, we become socially useless to the bosses or all these kind of issues. So I think it starts from a universal conception of humanity, but then it works its way back to identify the social forces that can deliver that good life, which must be people who are exploited and oppressed by the system, and the kind of exploitation that they suffer and the way that they can organize against that exploitation is at the core of any radical or revolutionary economic transition. This is not an argument for elitists and experts who will come down and plan everything for us, or enlightened people who just know like how things should be. It is rooted in a conception that billions of people on the planet can take control of their lives and their destinies, and through collective mass action can begin to create a world that is suitable for them, a world that is based in yes, a sustainable relationship with nature and a good life for us and our good relationship with other people. I want to quote Mikhail Lowy here, who said that eco-socialism is based on a reasonable expectation, which was already held by Marx, the predominance in a society without classes and liberated of capitalist alienation, of being over having, i.e., of free time for the personal accomplishment by culture, sports, play, scientific, erotic, artistic, and political activities, rather than the desire for an infinite possession of products. And so, one of the ways I want to sum that goal up within the concept of post-capitalist planning is the idea of radical abundance. Like, how can we have a world of radical abundance, which isn't stuff, but is time and which is human connection. So I think that's one of the main kind of economic points of the book. So as I said at the beginning of the talk, I don't really have a specific economic model as such. I think other people have come up with models, like Pat Devine's book on democratic socialist planning from 1988. Obviously, you've got Michael Albert's Paracon. There are already existing models out there, which there's some good bits in them. There's some bits which probably need to be looked at, but this isn't a book which kind of comes in with a set idea of what planning is. It is more about the concept of it and therefore the consequences of how it could begin to realign society. But the four things that I do want to talk about in terms of the kind of core economics of the argument in the book is the following. It has to be based, I think, on the first point, which is to establish social control over investment and production. The second point is to institute a participatory democracy. The third point is to abolish the social division of labor. And the fourth point is the abolition of commodity production. I'm going to go through those 4 points and explain the why they matter and why they have to be wrapped up in kind of the political strategic goals that we're talking about. So the first one is to establish a social control over investment and production. So this is a historic socialist demand, obviously. It is at the core of what socialism is. The idea that at the moment, the companies, corporations are controlled by private individuals, or in the modern case, complex arrangements of shareholders and funds and hedge funds and all these kind of things. But nevertheless, they are in private hands. They organize as private entities of capital in a competition with each other. And one of the key things, obviously, that has to be established if we want to end the ecocidal destruction of the planet by capitalism is social control over investment and production. So we have to be able to take out of the hands of private owners, the big businesses, the corporations, the big strategic parts of the economy. And we have to then be able to use that as the basis to begin to plan economic production. So rather than producing for private need, for profit, we begin to produce for human needs. And that is where we can begin to use techniques of planning to understand exactly what people will need through democratic forums and so on, in order to be able to produce. So that will help eliminate waste. That will help eliminate the hugely damaging consequences of all of this market competition, which is rooted in the way capitalism is functioning. So I think that's a very important demand, and that's that's a historic thing that the left has fought for. The second one, though, is it's not enough just to have that, because I think if you did have social control over investment and production, that could be limited to just forms of state socialism. Even fascist regimes often have state control over key parts of the economy. So there's nothing particularly necessarily left wing about that as such. What we need to add to it is the concept of participatory democracy as a new way of organizing the economy. The participatory democracy is crucial because it abolishes centrally the idea of there being politics here and the economy over here, and there's nothing you can do about the economy. that's left to like separate rules and laws which are governed by the invisible hand and whatever. Instead, if we abolish the distinction between politics and economics, and we have participatory democracy as a social model, which includes elements of workers' control over local decision makings within different workplaces, but is subordinated to a more general social plan of production and distribution and exchange as decided by participatory democratic forms and mechanisms. And again, I don't have a particular model for how that might work, but there are models out there that exist. I'm happy to share with people. I think they're quite interesting examples. But for me, I think it's very important that we emphasize, as INDEP does, the democratic concept of planning, because we don't want to just repeat the Soviet Union. I'm afraid there are some good things that they were trying to do there, but I don't think it's right that we just want to repeat that model. And one of the main reasons why I think that society ultimately failed, one of the reasons, is because there was such a lack of democratic participation for people. It meant that there was a real struggle over having any kind of consumer feedback about the quality of goods, like as a key example. And this led to all kinds of problems over production and waste and the quality of things, and like the way you could challenge production and the targets that were set or not. And so I think that we have to say that participatory democracy is a very important aspect of the new society that we're going to be building. The third thing is to abolish the social division of labor. This is also a crucial thing. Socialism makes our labor genuinely social because it removes the ways in which our labor is stolen from us through private property and the domination of abstract labor as regulated through the marketplace. The social division of labor that we have under capitalism divides us against each other into antagonistic hierarchies, roles, and jobs. It grants some people a relatively good life while others slave away for almost nothing. And of course, it is rooted in social divisions between genders, ethnicities, nationalities, whether you're disabled or not by capitalism. And so any eco-socialist society will have to abolish these social divisions and find ways to ensure that we use democratic planning to iron out these differences. We still have these differences, even like in very advanced capitalist countries, differences over wage, over what jobs people do. And of course, we have this division massively on a global scale. There's production in places like Bangladesh, Vietnam, and China, and not in other places. So, there's obviously huge racialized understandings of what jobs capital provides for who and so on. So all of that needs to be understood and challenged and overcome. And obviously, we don't accept that these hierarchies are normal or natural. I think that's one of the things that the far right really pushes today. The idea that sort of, hey, people are different, but some people are just better at some things than others, but they have a very obviously fascistic or far right authoritarian concept of how that hierarchy looks with white men at the top and so on. And obviously, we have to challenge that and so on. The final kind of economic point that I want to make within the book about the idea of this new society is the abolition of commodity production. So it's where we are progressively bringing more and more commodities and services out of the wage labor and monetary economy and making them free at the point of consumption. So we have that in Britain with the NHS. It is rickety and underfunded and kind of falling apart in some places, but it exists nevertheless as a post-war principle of the idea that you can have decommodified healthcare. Now, obviously, within the NHS, it is commodified. People paid wages. They have to buy drugs from pharmaceutical companies. They have to pay for electricity. They have to build hospitals with money. I mean, so it's not an island of post-capitalist economics, but nevertheless, the state provides those healthcare services in a decommodified sense at the point of consumption. And that's the kind of thing that we can begin to expand already under capitalism. What about some forms of food being made free? If they're already produced in abundance and thrown away, and it's wasteful, then we can begin to think about reorganizing that sector in such a way that, say, potatoes in many countries could probably be provided free at the moment. And that might also be a way of them planning production for them. So it's not just wasteful overproduction at times. And these are the kind of things that we need to be able to think about, because we need to destroy the economic point around which commodity production happens, because under capitalism it is incredibly wasteful and destructive. So I think I've got maybe 3 minutes left or something like that.
You just
Right?
you go and yeah. If you want to show the slide, for example, like you're free to do so. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right. I think Eric is keen for me to show a slide, so I'm gonna do that. Hold on. Let me just see
You
if I can.
said you wanted to do this, so I'm like,
Well, you said at the beginning, do you have any slides? And I was like, oh, maybe, but I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let me see if I can share this. And if I make it full screen, does that work? Okay. Does that
yes,
work? Can people
works.
see that? Oh my word. Okay, right. I'm going to finish on this point. So these are some specifics of how an eco-socialist society could begin to heal that metabolic rift. The first one is the ending of overproduction. So as we know, one of the monstrous things about capitalism is that although some people starve, and die needlessly of dysentery and things like that because they don't have access to medicines and so on. We live in a society which has massive overproduction of many things. Like lots of things are destroyed. Including medicines and things like that. We just overproduce food, um, um, and it doesn't go to the right places. It is destroyed, and this is a consequence of the reality of kind of market economics. So um, if we had a democratic planning of the economy, which was based on use value, not exchange value, then we can begin to plan production for need, not market share. So this will be a crucial shift away from the way that capitalism organizes work and organizes production at the moment. Apologies. Ending market competition is crucial because that is also wasteful. Companies waste time researching and designing very similar products or different products, but not sharing key breakthroughs. Obviously, there's huge rivalry between pharmaceutical companies over different things, and yes, I mean, I'm sure I don't need to tell people in this meeting the ways that market competition can be wasteful. Of course, within that, we have to challenge the assumption that only competition creates new ideas and products. Um, there is, we are very much aware that humans are a creative species. Humans like to design, they like to create, they like to innovate. You don't have to do that just because you're going to make potentially billions of pounds. And there's loads of people on the planet who create things all the time, not necessarily for just capitalist market kind of profit driven reasons. So that's one of the key things that we need to challenge. But we do need to use democratic planning to begin to plan out market competition. I'm not saying you can abolish it overnight, but it needs to be one of the goals. Removing the profit drive is obviously crucial. We've seen recently that nearly all of the main fossil capital companies like BP and Exxon have ditched green renewable programs or research and design on green technologies or green energy sources. Why? Their simple argument is that they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. They need to ensure a maximum return on their investment, and renewable energy just ain't where the money is. There's just not enough money there compared to carbon energy production. So as long as the profit drive remains as the key organizing factor of the economy, which therefore determines levels of investment in different economic developments and technologies and so on, we will not be able to get a green transition this side of just cataclysmic global warming. There's already a lot of articles out about how the green transition just isn't happening, like it's completely stalled. And this is despite all of the efforts, well, supposed efforts by politicians to make it happen. We would obviously end built-in obsolescence and destruction of end-of-line goods. Companies destroy perfectly good things just because they're end of season or they're, like whatever. I'm sure lots of us have smartphones. We're all aware of Apple's method certainly over the last few years of designing software updates that would run down the battery life on your phone, forcing you to buy new phones, because obviously, you can't have a thing where you just buy a phone and it lasts for 10, 15, 20 years because that that doesn't generate the profit that they need as a company. So obviously ending built-in obsolescence and destruction of end-of-line goods is another way that we can, really ensure that we're not unnecessarily wasteful. Obviously, stop making cheap rubbish that fills landfills in the oceans. There's a lot of things that are made that are no good. Reduce unnecessary bullshit jobs, as David Graeber called them. This is like one of the main things that we need to do. We need to reduce economic activity. So the fight for the 4-day week, the fight for the 3-day week, the fight to redistribute work, meaningful work to people, whilst reducing wasteful and unnecessary economic activity, is at the absolute forefront of the eco-socialist struggle, and that can only really be realized in a post-capitalist society where we have political power, but nevertheless we can still fight for those things to happen now. And I'm sure there's lots of people who'd very much like to not work these useless jobs that don't really help anyone. And the final one I want to end with is Pete Seeger. I'm sure people are familiar with Pete Seeger. He was the US folk singer. He did a song in 2008. I'm not going to sing it, but I like to call it the Seeger principle. It is about the kind of production that we would have under eco-socialism. If it can't be reduced, reused, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, redesigned, or removed from production. So these are just some examples. These are obviously not definitive. These are some examples in which we can begin to reimagine a society in which we have a better quality of life for all of us. We have a world in which we can spend more time with each other, where we're not just, kind of working 45, 50-hour weeks, and in which we have a much more sustainable relationship with the earth. Some of these things can be fought for and even won under capitalism. So we shouldn't just imagine, oh, none of this can happen until after the Glorious Revolution. But for us to really, really heal the metabolic rift and establish a sustainable relationship as part of nature with the rest of nature, we have to get rid of capitalism as an organizing economic principle of our lives. Because as long as we have that, it's not going to be sustainable for us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot. I will cut the recording here. And so everybody who watches this on YouTube, thanks for watching this.